The following program is produced through the community television facilities of Saugus TV. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of Saugus TV, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome back. Another episode of Know Your Town. Now, as always, I don't do the show alone. I started this show as a means of civic engagement, right? The line that I use is I don't like to see town departments or elected officials get a bad rap when they don't deserve it, you know? So I want to highlight what jobs people do, what their responsibilities are, how their constituents can help them and vice versa, what their offices can assist with. That's why I lead you with a first for this show. We're having a candidate on today. Usually I don't do candidates. Usually it's elected officials or, actual town employees or local employees, I should say. But I think it's important from a civic engagement standpoint to hear from every candidate for every office, which is why I lead you with a gentleman that's been around the North Shore for a long time, running for the 6th Congressional District seat that is currently occupied by Seth Moulton, who is running for the U.S. Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Jakious.
Andrew, thank you for having me here. Really
How are you?
I'm good.
How's it going?
Good.
Thanks for coming down.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
We gave you a little tour of the studio today.
Fantastic.
But it's a fun group. That's why I like cable access, because it's down to earth. Everybody that's in the support room right now, those are residents.
Yes.
They're employees, of course, but the residents.
I'm definitely going to tune into that dating show.
I have yet to see the dating show. My mother goes, "You should be honest." Why?
I think my wife would object if I were on it.
What type of bow tie would you bring to the dating
Exactly,
show?
yeah.
That is your signature piece, isn't it? Is the Rick Jakious bow tie?
It is, and I've worn it for years. And it is both the literal and figurative albatross around my neck. But I have found that it really is disarming. Like people,
Bruce Springsteen had the bandana. Stevie Nicks had the capes.
Absolutely. And the number of times people have come up to me and said, "Hey, I don't remember your name, but we met 5 years ago. I remember the bow tie," and then we have a meaningful, substantive conversation. It's just, it's at this point, it's kind of become my calling card, I guess.
So I will start with the classic, a variation on the classic Ted Kennedy question. Why do you want to represent the 6th District?
Yeah. I mean, the 6th District is an incredible district. My wife was born and raised here. She brought me here. I'm not a native.
Yep.
But we made the conscious decision to raise our children here. They both go to public schools. And for the last 11 years, I have been district director and chief of staff to Seth Moulton. And so I've gotten to know every single one of the 39 cities and towns in this district intimately, the people, the issues, the local businesses.
Right.
And it's such an incredible place. I mean, it is a place where every single community really has its own distinct culture.
Right, because it goes from, let's see if I do this correctly, Saugus is the bottom,
Correct.
It's probably the lowest, and then it goes up to Gloucester?
Goes all the way up to the New Hampshire border, Amesbury, so it's 39 cities and towns, most of Essex County.
Right, it's like the northeast corner of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So, I guess tell us about the road that led you to get into the race.
Yeah, it's, my background is really in public service. So for me, this is about service, not politics. I didn't grow up talking politics at the dinner table. I didn't know what political party my parents were until I was probably in my 30s.
Right.
But what I did learn from them, and it was by leading by example, was the ethic of service. My mom was a primary care physician. My dad was a public employee union. Right. He volunteered for pretty much everything. There was not a sports team or initiative that he wouldn't volunteer for. And I really saw the value and the importance of community and service. And so when I was in college, I was studying to become an engineer. because I was good at math and science, but I wasn't happy. I was sitting there and I was wondering why all of these other people are really happy poring over these spreadsheets. Why am I not? And I was parking cars as a summer job, put extra money in my pocket, and an advertisement for a national service program called City Year came on the radio. Stranger's car, radio station I never would have listened to. And this ad comes on and it says, give a year back to your community. And something just clicked for me. It really brought together
Sounds like you're joining the Peace Corps.
It's many people call AmeriCorps the domestic Peace Corps. So you spend a year of service, you get a small living stipend, you get an education award. And that really opened my eyes to the ways in which I could make a difference in the world. And I began to look at the ways I could do that and saw government as a vehicle for social change. And that's really what got me into this.
So I will note this just because I know you know her. One of our previous guests on this show was the Essex County Register of Deeds, Eileen Duff, and I've known her for a couple of years. You and I haven't known each other that long, but one of the things that has always struck me about someone like Eileen is you can just hear it in her voice, the passion for public service. Even when her and I would drive around her district and we'd see people protesting, she'd always want to stop and see what the problem was, what the issue was. And I've always had a tremendous amount of respect for people like that. So I'm glad you've seen a lot of it firsthand.
Yeah,
right?
thank you.
I mean, well, I guess I'll go here first. You have a background in not just community service, but not charity work too, was it?
Yeah, nonprofit management.
Nonprofit, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So for a bunch of years, when I actually worked for a member of Congress out on the West Coast. And my wife, who's from here, came back for grad school.
Yep.
And I like to say after I ran a congressional campaign in 2004. After that election, I had to choose between politics and a woman. I chose wisely, followed my now wife out here, and went to back to work for City Year, which was the organization I had worked for.
Yep.
It's a national organization. We did physical service projects around the country. I worked specifically at our Boston site to basically help address the high school dropout crisis.
Yep.
We put teams of Corps members in schools to work on attendance, behavior, and course performance to help students prepare and be ready for high school graduation. And then eventually, when there was only one job left there that I wanted, and that person wasn't going anywhere, I decided it was time to kind of spread my wings, and I became the CEO of the Massachusetts Nonprofit Network.
Yep.
This is an organization that does capacity building and public relations and advocacy for the small to medium-sized nonprofit worlds. Organizations not all that different than the Saugus Historical Society or Saugus TV. Small organizations, small budgets.
Saugus Action Volunteers for the Environment. There's all sorts of groups like that.
Absolutely, there's thousands.
Even the Lions Club,
Yeah.
And that's almost, and actually I think most of those groups we've had on this are the Saugus Garden Club,
Yep.
who gave me this lovely, lovely centerpiece not too long ago. That's the core of community for me, especially from the seat of Saugus, but for any of you watching this in one of any of the other towns in Rick's district, they get involved in something, right?
Yeah.
I know there's something. Elks, the Freemasons, local garden club, the Lions Club, anything. We have guests that volunteer their time, come down here and help us film shows. I mean, I'm a volunteer myself, know.
I couldn't agree with you more. Let me add one other element to that, because you opened talking about the importance of civic engagement and people understanding what their town and state elected officials do. And that's an incredibly important thing you're doing. And I don't think people realize that aside from the nonprofit world, there's this incredible world of volunteerism on town boards, on town commissions, on town elected officials.
Right.
There are over 1,800 elected officials in the 6th Congressional District.
Saugus Town meeting members don't make a dime.
Yeah.
Finance committee members don't make a dime. I think the selectmen and school committee get a very small stipend, but my joke there is that's their raffle ticket budget.
Yeah.
Because every event they go to, they buy raffle tickets for whatever it is.
And these people are making a massive commitment of their time and
full-time
energy
job
back to their community.
Absolutely. When I guess you were chief of staff at Moulton's office. That's a big job. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably important to take a half step back and help people understand what a congressional office
For those of
does.
us that have only heard Chief of Staff from Leo McGarry on the West Wing,
Yes.
please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was district director for 8 years and then chief of staff for 3. A member of Congress typically has 2 offices, maybe more than 2, but you can divide it between the DC office and your district office.
Right.
And they play connected but very different functions. The DC office focuses on federal policy, government oversight, the DC matters. And your district office, at least the way I ran it, I like to think of it as a small social service agency, like a small nonprofit. It exists to support and the needs of our individual constituents. And that takes a few forms. One, you interact a lot with leaders of the towns and the cities.
Yep.
Whether that's the elected leaders, civic leaders, business leaders, trying to understand what are the important needs in the community. But you also interact directly with the constituents. There are over 800,000 constituents in the 6th district.
Wow.
And many of them come to us because maybe they missed a Social Security check. Maybe they're seeking VA benefits and they aren't getting them. Sometimes it's something as simple as we had someone call us and say, I just got married and realized my passport's expired, and if I don't get a new passport before my honeymoon, my wife is going to leave me. And we help them expedite their passport. And so it's helping individual constituents solve their problems. And that's the piece of it, I think, that people kind of at least abstractly understand the DC aspect. They don't always understand the work that's done in the district and the way in which the district office helps inform the DC office as to what's happening on the ground at home, and the DC office helps the district office understand what's happening in DC.
You've got this sort of, legislative political arm in DC, and then you've got the other hand, which is, I'm going to call it customer service, but it's constituent service.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
People call you because they don't know who to call.
Yeah.
So even if it's not really something your office can help with, I know and you know that the response is absolutely, we'll get on that. Let me connect you with whoever it is at the DPW or whoever it is at this department or whatever, and they almost see that as a forward face. I also know if you want to get, I believe it's if you want to get a tour of the White House, you have to go to the congressman's office, which I still have never done. One of these days. I mean, I'll give you this one. I mean, I've only met Congressman Moulton a few times, but my first interaction with his office was about 10 years ago, be 10 years this year. I was holding a sign on election day for somebody, one of the selectmen, I think, and one of your underlings, you'll know who I'm talking
Co-workers.
about. Co-workers, yeah. She always says you were her favorite boss. So.
And she's from Saugus.
She's from Saugus. Jen Migliori was her name. I had never met her. She's about the age then that I am now. Just showed up at one of the polling places to give granola bars and fruit to all of the people that were holding signs. And she goes, yeah, this is just something my office does. I'm like, wow, all right, thank you. I will take a water.
Yeah.
And I always thought, I'm glad they've got their ears this low to the ground. Even I believe Seth Moulton's office is in, is it Salem?
Salem, yeah.
Saugus to Salem, even though it's 2 towns, is about a 45-minute drive. So I'm never over there.
Yeah.
But I'm glad these people aren't hard to get a hold of if you need them.
Well, let me tell you how that came about. A good friend of mine created a nonprofit organization called New Politics. And the premise was to get military, Peace Corps, and AmeriCorps members, people who've served their country, to run for office. The premise being, once upon a time, 80% of the members of Congress had all served together in World War II. So what does it look like to rekindle that idea of service to country above partisan politics? And they created New Politics. It's nonpartisan. They recruit Republicans and Democrats to run for office. The qualifying, the requirement is that they need to have served their country, whether it's Peace Corps or AmeriCorps. And so when my friend Emily created this back in 2011 or so, she was encouraged to go visit this guy, Seth Moulton, who at the time was in Texas, because he was a combat Marine veteran, and convince him to run for office. And sort of the rest is history. She recruited him to run for office. She was his initial proof of concept. And when he was elected, she came to me and said, you have a service background, you live in the district, you understand the social service space, you understand Congress, you understand politics. Would you like to get back into this work? And I said, if this is going to be an office that's going to roll up its sleeves and get things done, then yes. If we're just going to show up at egg breakfast and chicken dinners and parades and wave, then no.
Right.
And I sat down with Seth and he said, no, I want to do things differently. I want this to be an office that makes a difference in people's lives. And that's been an ethos and that has underlined everything we did, and it's exactly why the people we hire carry that as well.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I went through the same thing when I was in the student government at UMass Lowell. As I sat on, I was there for 3.5 years, and towards the end of it, I turned like cynical, like kind of grumpy, because I got tired of sitting in meetings where we talking about doing things. We'd leave, I'm going, it's 7:30 at night, I'm freezing, and I haven't eaten dinner yet. What's the charge from this meeting? What are we leaving with? And I had gotten to the point, and the student government president trusted me, where I had strong relationships with everybody at the university. I was on the state board of higher ed. So if I saw a problem that the dean of student affairs could help me fix, I just sent them an email. We've worked it out, and then I left and didn't tell anybody. That was so much easier for me then let's start a petition, let's go here, let's do this, let's go to a parade. Do you feel that ethos has really carried you through? Do you think it's stayed true past the last 10 years you've been with the congressman?
Absolutely. I mean, when people look at politics right now, when they look at the state of our country and our government, I can understand why they're so dismayed. I can understand why they say, why on earth would you like to do this?
Right.
But it's the moments when you really have an impact in an individual's lives, or the opportunities where you have to make a big impact on a lot of people's lives, that really carry you through. I had a mentor, he was a community organizer, and he used to always, his definition of community organizing was meet people where they're at, talk about the things they want to talk about, and do something about it. And that's just really been kind of the motivating factor for the work I do.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really great way. I like meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
Right? The people that come to you, they don't always know what a congressman does or what their office does. But if you can help them, they'll remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and meet people at, is carries sort of two implications. One, the people who often need your help, you have to go out and find them. They don't know to come to you.
Right.
If you just sit and wait for them to come to you, it's the same people who maybe tend to understand how to navigate the system.
The guy that really needs you isn't going to know to pick up the phone.
But it's also meeting people where they're at, is where when they do come to you, or you do get to them, where are they at in their life? What are they, helping, understanding their perspective, spending a moment to walk a mile in their shoes.
I mean, do you recall any major issues that hit close to home for you in I guess all your lines of work where you were like, I have to fix this. We have to do something about this? I know there have been probably a ton, but
there's so many. The one that maybe I will spell out is, the head of the union at GE, IUE CWA Local 201, came to us and said, "Hey, we have a crisis. Like, all of our machinists are within a handful of years of retiring, and we have not built a bench of people with the experience necessary to continue this work. And if we don't train up a whole bunch of machinists fast, then we're going to lose this work.
5 years from now,
GE Lynn will fold."
Yeah.
And it's not just GE Lynn and the 3,500 people, engineers and machinists that work there. There's a cottage industry of advanced manufacturing on the North Shore that would vanish as well. And so I really saw this as mission critical. And so when GE made a decision to move from Connecticut to Massachusetts, they made this grand pronouncement that they were going to invest $50 million philanthropically in Boston, was what they said. And we had an opportunity, Seth and I had an opportunity, Congressman Moulton and I had an opportunity to go meet with the CEO at the time, Jeff Immelt. And we were sort of strategizing on, like, okay, what's our ask? And I said, well, ask for $10 million for Lynn. Like, what could go wrong? And explain, like, the jet engine was invented in this community.
Right.
So we went in, we made that ask, and to our surprise, he said, yeah, like, of course, that makes sense. You have a plant there. And so they agreed to invest $10 million. That was only the first step, though, because once the word got out that the GE Foundation was investing $10 million in Lynn, obviously and understandably, everybody wanted a piece of that money. But what I felt was very important was to keep it laser focused on this idea of job training and bringing up this new generation of machinists and ensuring not just that we have them there to do the job, but that we also diversify that workforce so that there's a greater number of women, a greater number of people of color. And so since then, we have created a robust job training program that exists in 3 of the technical schools with state-of-the-art machinery that is pumping out people who are prepared for the good paying advanced manufacturing jobs. And that was just one of those where it was so obvious, the need, and it was just a question of finding a path to get there.
I went to a vocational high school. I know a lot of those people. I believe both of my grandparents at one point worked at GE. And it's obviously it's changed since then. I think back in the day, I think a half of Saugus was employed at GE.
Of course.
But you do sort of forget that history, which is the jet engine was invented there. It's almost as important to America as Lowell and the textile industry, or Allentown and Bethlehem and the Industrial Revolution, in Pennsylvania. Was there ever one particular constituent? You don't have to identify them by name, of course, but you were like, I don't care if nobody knows I helped them, but I'm so glad their situation has been fixed.
There have been so many of those. We had a woman who came to us with stage 4 brain cancer, who needed to get on, was depleting her life savings, needed to get on Medicare. We were able to fast track her Medicare application. We had a gentleman in Nahant, veteran who needed an electric wheelchair. He was basically increasingly homebound because of a lack of mobility. We were able to help get him an electric wheelchair. He was able to go to his grandchildren's birthday party. He was able to get out and see friends. We had another gentleman who was another veteran who was living out of his car. He did not realize the veterans benefits that he was entitled to. We helped him get him signed up for his benefits. He ended up in an apartment. He reconnected with his estranged children. I mean, there are situations with people who've immigrated to this country and have lived here and worked hard for 20, 30 years, facing deportation, that we've helped navigate that system. Those time and time again, I mean, those are the things that really make the job worth doing.
Right. And I think no matter what, political or government office you have, there is a lot more legwork than I think a lot of residents or voters even notice.
Yeah. We get 4,000 to 5,000 emails and phone calls a week. And we have a team of about 18 people. So
18 people to read 1,000 emails a day.
Yeah. Now, admittedly, a lot of those, and I'm not discounting these, but these are people who get emails saying, tell your click here and tell your congressman. Right. So a lot of it is incoming of like, support this bill or oppose this bill. But nonetheless, like, we take all of those emails seriously. It's important to understand and to kind of factor into your decision making the input of your constituents. And so much of it is that, but within that, those 4,000 to 5,000 are individuals like the ones we just discussed who, they're facing really important life or death situations.
It's like even that, I think about capital improvement projects, every, say, 50 years, you need to build a new high school.
Yeah.
You need, that costs tens of millions of dollars, but it also, usually there's a Proposition 2.5 override or something.
Yeah.
But it also takes years to put together those plans.
Yeah.
You get feedback from the unions, from the, relevant parties, from the, abutters of the property.
Yeah.
There's a lot of legwork that goes into that. And I know you have a lot of experience sort of just doing that sort of stuff behind the scenes and in the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you get to the ribbon cutting.
Yeah, I mean, government was not designed to work quickly. Which
was it Winston Churchill said, democracy is the second worst form of government, everything else is the worst?
Exactly. And so, yes, there's often a lot of bureaucratic process, and I would very much like to see us figure out how to cut through that streamline. I think there's important ways in which we can show Americans that we can build things again, that we can do things again. We've gotten a little bit stymied and a little bit, our ability to build things. We need to revive that.
This isn't Eisenhower and the highway system.
Exactly, and there were good reasons for that, right? We put in regulations, we put in on things to protect the environment, to protect worker safety, and you don't want to see those go away, but you also don't want to see those weaponized. You also don't want to see multiple layers of unnecessary bureaucracy, and so understanding how to kind of cut through that and navigate those when you look at our infrastructure, I mean. Our water and wastewater infrastructure in Massachusetts is a ticking time bomb. Almost every single community needs massive upgrades to their water and wastewater infrastructure. And that can't be done without
without tearing up the streets.
Well, yeah, and without significant investment from federal government.
Now, I guess let's pivot to, say, a year from now. Let's say you win. You're in the job. How does that change? How does your day-to-day change from what it is now to then? What are you bringing to that you haven't already experienced?
Yeah. Well, fortunately for 11 years, I've sort of had a passenger seat, I guess, to the experience.
You're the deputy
So I understand and can step in on day one. I feel confident that I can step in and do this job on day one. In the last 3 years, for the first 8 years, I was district director. I was entirely Massachusetts-based. My entire universe that I focused on was this district, the 6th district. For 3 years, I was chief of staff. So instead of moving to D.C., most chiefs of staff live in D.C. Instead of doing that, I decided to stay here in the district because it's important to stay grounded in the needs of our constituent and to commute to DC. And so I was keeping a schedule that was not as... It's challenging when my kids are probably...
It's not like you live in Delaware and you can jump on the train.
Yeah, but it's also not like, I live in Seattle. So.
Right.
There were actually days, Andrew, when the Sumner Tunnel was closed. There were days that it took me longer to get from Swampscott to Logan than it took to get from Logan to DC.
Right. Take that blue line.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think I understand how to do the job. I understand how to hit the ground running. I understand what it takes to build the relationships necessary to get things done and to cut through the morass of DC. But I also understand what it means to stay grounded in the realities of the people here in the district. And so the only real difference will be, from my life right now, campaigning, will be obviously that I'll spend 3-4 days a week in DC as part of the job to do that. But you always come home, you always stay grounded to the work here.
Now, I know you've released a couple of plans. I actually got a campaign email this morning that I didn't have a chance to read about civic engagement.
Yes.
So why don't you start with some of the points of that plan?
Sure, absolutely. So, it's January 6th today. Obviously,
on the day we're filming this, I don't know when you guys will see this. Yes.
So it's January 6th today. And it felt important to me to recognize not just the historical significance of January 6th.
5 years ago,
and 5 years ago, and the riots and the way in which Donald Trump tried to, to steal the election, but to also offer up a positive vision and forward. And for me, it's about civic engagement. It's about bringing people back together. And so it's really kind of a two-part plan. First is, because always, people will love to make proposals, but will very frequently won't tell you how they're going to pay for them.
Yeah.
This one has a pay for, and the pay for is directly related to one of the root causes of our fundamental problem, which to me is social media. When you look at the way in which social media has divided us, when you look at the way it's created social isolation, the way in which it has divided family members, the tribalism it's created, the way it has pushed extremist political agendas. This is really problematic. And so I propose a 50% tax on the digital ad revenue of of the large social media companies.
Just the ad revenue.
Just the ad revenue, which is hundreds of billions of dollars, to fund a couple of civic engagements initiatives. One is a massive expansion of national service so that by 2036, 1 million young people can serve their country through AmeriCorps or some other national service program. The second is creating essentially like a civic physical equivalent of the presidential physical fitness test. Some of you may, I don't know if it still existed when you were in school, but you did the pull-ups and the sit-ups and the push-ups. But around civics education, when you look at the test that individuals need to take to become U.S. citizens, less than a third of native-born Americans can pass that test. And so what we want to do is essentially create a national civics initiative to get a baseline understanding for people around our civics education.
Well, I mean, January 6th, I won't go into detail on it. I remember exactly what I was doing that day. It was rather surprising. My uncle is an electrician, and about once every 5 years, he says, "Hey, listen, I'm sure the guy, would you come and hold the flashlight?" I said, "Yeah, sure, whatever." I was free that day, absolutely. So I'm in Somerville in the basement of a pitch black and very dusty, building because we're trying to fix the lights. And one of the residents of the building comes running down the stairs, shows us his phone, and January, the rally in D.C., the riots and the protests. And my uncle knew immediately he had lost me for the rest of the night because I was really mad. And I had to explain to him, this is a independent, proprietor. He's worked really on his own for his whole life, not politically active, say, like you and me. And I had explained to him how elections actually work in this country, which is you don't vote for the president directly, you vote to give a recommendation to the elector, which then casts a ballot, which is counted on January 6th.
Yeah.
And I had to walk him through that, and I remember thinking, I'm really surprised that this isn't more well known, because technically January 6th is the most important day in a presidential election.
Yeah.
Even though for most people on, November 7th, they already know who won. Technically, that doesn't happen until it's certified, which is what goes on in January, after all of the individual electors have voted in their state capitals, and those ballots get transported to D.C. and counted again, in the Capitol Rotunda. And I think about that a lot. I'm still mad about it. It's part of the reason why I ended up going to law school, because I've never been so frustrated in my life. And, I don't think I'll ever forget something like that. I mean, that must have been tough for you too.
It was eye-opening.
Right.
Honestly, I went through almost, several different distinct emotional states over the course of the day. And I would say it was the point at which I realized, even though we are the strongest country in the world, even though I think the idea of American democracy is one of the greatest ideas in the history of mankind, it was the first time I recognized how fragile it was. I think I was naive to think that it was I think we all thought it was it was durable. It can't go away. We have the rule of law. We have good people who believe in the rule of law. So I think initially, before I started seeing the footage of the riots, I almost didn't believe it. I was almost like, that doesn't
like
happen. That doesn't happen.
Olympus has fallen.
Yeah, and I was like, this doesn't happen. This happens elsewhere. This happens in some banana republic, not in the United States of America. And that gave away quickly as you saw the videos of the people crashing through the Capitol. And we, as staff members, we had a skeleton crew. I don't remember exactly why on that day, but we had a very small crew down there with the congressman. And, that gave way to real genuine concern and fear for where are they? Are they safe? What is happening right now? Which eventually gave way to anger, which was just like, how did we allow this to happen? What is going on that we allowed this to happen in our country?
The thing that really bothered me, you remember the photo of the guy that put his feet up on Speaker Pelosi's desk?
Yes.
I said this to my uncle on the way home that day. I said, there's a big difference, Republican, Democrat, like whoever you want, there's a big difference between having opinions about a liberal woman from San Francisco and putting your feet up on the desk of the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, second in line for the presidency.
Yeah.
And I'm still angry. I'm getting mad now. I said, we're not supposed to be like this. It's not supposed to happen here. And I think it's inspired a lot of people around my age. I think law school applications are up across the country. I mean, I want to pivot now to your housing plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know came out a couple of, maybe a month ago.
I think that sounds right.
I read parts of it.
Yeah.
You've got a very detailed, pillared, step-by-step plan for how you want to bring housing to the district.
Absolutely. So
it doesn't necessarily mean putting up as many apartments as you'd like.
Correct. When I launched this campaign, I made a commitment to visit all 39 cities and towns in the first 30 days of my campaign, because it was a reflection of both who I've been for the last 11 years and how I want to govern and lead as a member of Congress. And I had a lot of conversations. I went to senior centers. I went to VFW halls. I went to ice cream shops. I went to small businesses, bookstores, and had a lot of conversations. And not surprisingly, everyone is feeling absolutely crushed by the cost of living. And yes, there are the main drivers. There's housing, there's education and healthcare, there's health, there's childcare. There's energy costs, which is a big factor in New England. And then increasingly, because of things like Donald Trump's tariffs, we're seeing people just having trouble with day-to-day costs like groceries and everyday goods. And they're seeing their dollars, their paychecks aren't going up, but their bills are. They're getting stretched thinner and thinner. A lot of people are on fixed income. But the thing I heard over and over and over again from folks here in Massachusetts was just the crippling cost of housing. And so it was important for me that the first thing that I came out with was a proposal on housing. Now, this takes a couple of approaches. One is it incentivizes communities that want to be a part of the solution. So if communities want to be a part of the solution and want to build housing, we should provide the funding and the incentives and the means for them to do so. So, the MBTA Communities Act is obviously very controversial. The mechanism is somewhat punitive, right? It's like if you don't pass this, you don't have access to the grants. We're in the middle of the crisis. I think you throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. My approach is different. My approach is if you want to be a part of the solution, we will help provide the funding to do so. Now, that's not new funding. There's existing HUD funding. There's existing transportation funding. All it does is it basically creates a system that advantages those communities that are building housing to have access to those grant funds. So that's one piece of it. Second piece of it is we just have to unlock the potential of the private sector. This cannot be, one of the things I've learned over 11 years is the really difficult problems that we have to tackle cannot be solved by government alone, cannot be solved by the private sector alone, cannot be solved by nonprofits alone. It has to be a collective effort. And so that nowhere is that more obvious and true than in housing. We have to unlock the potential of the private sector to build more housing because we just plain and simple have a supply problem. The next problem is that we have a significant problem in what's called the missing middle. These are families and people who make just enough money that they don't access any sort of subsidies through the government, but they don't have enough to kind of,
be comfortable.
Buying your first house was sort of the way you generated wealth, began to build and generate wealth, and that's out of reach for people. And so things like down payment assistance, rental assistance for folks in that kind of missing middle category is incredibly important.
Well, it's like even, in the old movies or in the TV shows, you carrying the bride across the threshold, you've got the keys in your hand. And it's two people that are like 25.
Yeah.
I'll be 26 in September.
Yep.
I cannot begin to tell you how far away I am from buying a house.
Yep.
I grew up in low-income housing. I grew up still in low-income housing. I grew up on food stamps. Even with going to law school, would I like to go into Boston every day and live at Suffolk or live in the area because it would make the commute easier? Absolutely. Could I even begin to afford $1,500 a month in rent?
Yeah.
No, because you can't work. You really can't work and make that money and make money for groceries and focus on my studies. So I stay home another couple of years.
I was chatting with a gentleman in Newburyport yesterday. He bought his first house in the early 60s, and I think he said he spent $13,000
from a
for
Sears
it.
catalog. Yeah,
Exactly.
Right.
And you know, there's multiple problems there, but one of them is just the way in which we have created the perverse incentives in terms of our zoning, in terms of what can be built on an individual. You know, you have to build either multiple apartment units, or you have to build a McMansion, and you know, no longer do you see the 1,500, 2,000 square foot starter homes that are needed for people to basically get into the housing market.
Right. And I think you're going to start to see more companies. I believe Costco is doing this, where they're putting a Costco at the base of, say, a place like Market Street in Linfield, where you're sort of building this complex that is a grocery store, a series of apartments, these plazas. I think you're going to start to see more and more of that, just because it mixes the zoning and it provides a lot of room.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, when you look at the housing in Massachusetts, right? You know, there's neighborhoods that have like these triple deckers, and there's neighborhoods that have single family homes, and there's this diversity of housing that actually makes the neighborhoods and the communities seem really cool. So I think a diversity of housing. I mean, I think that model where you have a walkable community, where your grocery store's there and all the amenities are there, especially when you tie it to transit-oriented development. When you tie it to, say, a rail line, which is another big part of my transportation plan, or pardon me, my housing plan, is drawing a direct connection between investment in our transit and investment in our housing, because they go hand in hand.
And I think on top of that is it connects people. Yeah. You know, if you shop at the same grocery store, you're going to run into the same people. If you take the train, you're going to run into the same people. And, you know, you touched on social media earlier. You know, people have never been more accessible to one another and more emotionally distant than they are right now. You know, we've never been so connected and so disconnected at the same time.
Yeah.
And you start to see people putting their phones on Do Not Disturb, or shutting them off altogether and just talking. You know, and I think that's a piece of government awareness and civic engagement that is incredibly important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
You know, there are, my favorite part of the Bill of Rights, you know, the First Amendment protections covered under the First Amendment, you know them: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, right to petition the government, and my personal favorite is right to peaceful assembly. Now, most people take that to mean protests. Technically, petitioning the government and assembly could be the same thing. But it's not just that. It's the piece that says you and I could walk down the street, sit on a park bench, and have a conversation about whatever we feel like having without somebody telling us we aren't allowed to have it.
Yeah.
That's peaceful assembly.
Yeah, many years ago there was a famous book by a gentleman, Robert Putnam, and it was called Bowling Alone. I don't know if you ever read it, but
I like the name though. I like where this is going.
And what it was talking about was the demise of things like bowling leagues, of Elks clubs, of those places that people came to
Legion
gather.
halls.
American Legion halls, things like that, and how those were going away, and how it was tearing apart at the social fabric of the United States. And what was interesting was, you know, this was basically at the dawn of the internet. It sort of ended with but there's this magical thing called the internet that just might bring us all together.
Right.
And unfortunately we have found, and initially I think we all thought that, we all believed that, and there was perhaps a path where that would be the case. I think we have found that the algorithms and the way social media is created actually incentivizes pulling us further apart.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, not just in the online universe, but in our physical universe, there is a disincentive to essentially getting beyond the boundaries of our own family, our own tribe, our own comfort zone. And some of the things that would, like transit-oriented development, yes, that's all about housing. That's about connecting people to efficiently to their jobs and their housing. But there is also a way that those sorts of things build community as well.
Right. I mean, you said earlier, you had this initiative, 39 towns in the 6th Congressional District. You visited them all in 30 days. What was the biggest surprise about that? I mean, you've been top to bottom in this district for years.
Yeah.
What was different about this journey? And was there any huge surprises there?
Yeah.
That's a lot of traveling, by the way. I want to point that out. That's a very, very long trip.
There was a lot of miles, for sure. Candidly, I don't know that I was particularly surprised, in part because I've spent 11 years making those trips over and over and over again. The thing that always strikes me, that I'm just always amazed by, is how incredible this district is in terms of you could be driven blindfolded to Danvers or Newburyport or North Andover or Billerica or Marblehead or Saugus, and they could take off the blindfold and you could kind of guess where you're at.
Right.
Because each community has its own. And that's not true in every congressional district where you have highways and strip malls and these cookie cutter suburbs and everything looks the same everywhere you go. And this just district has a unique identity, and you get out on the coastal communities and there's just these incredible rolling hills and farmlands. And it's an amazing district in terms of its diversity and its uniqueness.
Nahant and Andover are very different places.
Very different places, and you would know you were in Nahant and Andover when you got there. I suppose the most surprising is just the mindset of folks in terms of their real genuine fears about where we're heading. I mean, this is the first. Studies are showing that this is the first generation that believes that their children are going to be worse off of them.
Doomsday clock.
The first generation. This is the first generation of Americans in the history of our country that is going to be worse off than its parents. And I think people are really struggling with that idea. And when you add the ways in which the president is manipulating and taking advantage of those fears to just really pull at I think the fabric of democracy and our connectedness, there's genuine concerns. I wouldn't say people have lost hope. I still think there's a lot of hope out there, and I think that's what keeps people going. But there are definitely concerns about the direction we're heading.
You sort of have to keep your own. I want to make sure this comes out correctly. Everybody has their own experiences. I said earlier, my grandparents both worked at GE. My mother was a single mother. She raised quadruplets on food stamps and Section 8 housing. And at some point, she's going to agree to do this show with me to talk about town meeting and Saugus Housing Authority and some of the other things that she has gotten involved in over the years. But everybody has their own view of what the American dream is to them. And I think it's important that they keep their own spark alive, right? So when I sit and I get to chat with people such as yourself, or Eileen Duff, or any of the other area representatives, I think I'm glad these people are as focused on their constituents, or in your case, I guess it's potential constituents, as I would be if I was in that job. Even though I may not have the answer to their question, I'm going to do my best to help them. That's one foot. That's one step you take. You sit at the Legion Hall, you have the conversation, you have coffee with those people. It's not just about the parades and the photos and the ribbon cuttings, but those stories that you mentioned earlier about those veterans that you helped, and the husband that was afraid his wife was going to leave him over the visa. Those are real individuals. Those are real lives. People that have grown up, maybe had their own children, had their own experiences, and you've helped them. Congressman Moulton's office has helped them. And I always said that if I ever decided to run for an office like that or any office, you never forget the reason why you're there. You know, that is civic engagement at its core.
Yeah.
Now, before we end, because we do have to wrap up, are there any, we'll do a fun one.
Yes.
Are there any really fun experiences that you've had over the years that you'd like to share with constituents or at particular events or anything like that where you go, man, what am I doing here? This is fun. You know? I live in a cartoon.
Yes, yes. Man, a few things come to mind. I mean, one of the things is because we're a very civic, service-oriented office, every 2 or 3 months we would always do like a community service project. That might be helping out at a soup kitchen or at a food bank or helping out with, coastal beach restoration one of the ones I just always love, it's so much fun, is Habitat for Humanity.
Yep.
It's funny because I've never repaired a thing in my life in my own home. And I'm terrible at it.
Right, I've done the
terrible
opposite.
at it. But for some reason, you get on that job site and they give you, the nail gun and and it's such
your extreme makeover.
Exactly, and it's such a fun experience, and to understand that several months from then, this is going to be somebody's home.
Right.
Like they're going to begin building that American dream. That's absolutely fantastic. And then, the other one is just, so much of our district is coastline. And so anytime you can get out on the ocean. I mean, we've been out on General Patton's boat, the If and When.
Really?
Yes. I've been out on a lobster boat before. Anytime you can just get out on the water, it's such a special, magical place and time.
Well, it's like for us, as kids, it was going to Salem Willows. My grandmother.
Did you ever have the chop suey sandwich?
Oh, I'll get to the chop suey. Obviously they have the arcades and the popcorn stand and all that stuff. Well, my grandmother, from time to time, and we talk about my grandmother a ton on this show because she was a small business owner and a wonderful woman. Andrew, go upstairs, tell your mother 45 minutes, you and I are going to go up to Salem Willows. Don't tell anybody else. I don't need all these people. And her and I would take a ride over together in her, ginormous, it's like rode on the ground like the Flintstones car. She had a Crown Victoria, I think, Grand Marquis. And she would take me to Salem Willows, and we'd get a chop suey sandwich. She always ordered it in the box with the bread, though.
Yeah.
She'd pour the soy sauce on it. Was it good food? Objectively. Was it a fun tradition for $2?
Yeah.
And then we go over to the arcade, and I'd play whatever I felt like, and she would sit at one of the slot machines, and we'd go a few times a summer, her and I. And when you see that kind of excitement in a community, especially around somewhere like Salem, but go to any football game on the North Shore, go to any pep rally on the day before Thanksgiving, and just see the pride some of these people have in their community, in their own hobbies and interests, the garden clubs and the car shows and all that. And you go, there really are some incredible people around here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to get up to Marblehead more often. I want to see, some of the old style, not Victorian, Gilded Age, some of the stuff that's in, this part of Massachusetts that I've never been a chance to see. And like I said, you just never forget the heart that's in this community. My joke about the North Shore is it's a bunch of Italian and Irish guys arguing about whose family has been in the town more generations and which restaurants used to be where the current restaurants are.
Yes.
And you know what?
My wife's family still calls every restaurant by what it was 3 restaurants ago.
Right. And, I'll meet people in my schooling from all over the world, and I'll try to explain this to them, and I'm like, you're just not going to get it. you have to go up to Regina. You have to go up to Pocari's. You got to try a piece of this. You got to go to Salem Willows. You got to really see what the North Shore is.
Yeah.
And then you'll get the other guys from Massachusetts that are in class that go, yeah, Andrew's from Saugus, which means he thinks it's the greatest place in the world. And no matter what happens, you're not going to change his mind.
Yeah.
You know,
and it is, and everyone,
right.
you know, will say that about their community, and they're right.
And the other 38 towns.
It is the greatest to them, and that's what's special about it. But you mentioned food, and it's funny because one of the things I always insisted, because our DC staff, most congressional DC staff, it's generally not made up of entirely people from your district.
Yes.
You're hiring from a broad pool of people from all around the country. So we would like to get them up here to get the experience. And one of the things I was always like, you have to have a roast. Like you can't work for this office until you've had a roast. I don't insist that they do the three. I highly recommend they do the three-way. I don't insist.
Then
but
you have to explain the difference.
do insist that unless they
Right.
have some sort of dietary restriction, you're not officially a part of the
You got to
team
explain the difference
until you've had a
between
roast.
Sweet Baby Ray's and James River. Why it's James River.
100%.
I like Miracle Whip, but it can't be Miracle Whip. It's
Yeah.
got to be real mayonnaise.
Yes.
That's community.
Yeah.
And by extension, that's politics. If you go down to, say, I apologize, people in the other towns, I keep naming Saugus places, but you go over to the Irontown or you go over to the Hammersmith, on a Sunday, it's all locals and retired teachers eating grilled muffins because they're catching up with one another.
Yeah.
You go to the American Legion breakfast on Sunday mornings, and it's, the same people that have known each other for 50 years.
Yep.
But at the same time, everybody I just mentioned, those are the ones that show up on Veterans Day to stand over a grave and, with the flag. Those are the ones to go to the Christmas tree lighting and count down just because it's nice to see the kids get excited for Santa.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why I do this, just to bring everyone a little closer to home. Now, we got to wrap up in a minute. Do you have any final statements? I think it's that camera there, if it's on.
Sure. Well, absolutely. I am running for Congress here in the 6th District. It's a community that I've been a part of for many years. My wife was born and raised here. We've raised our children here. For the last 11 years, I've been serving all 39 cities and towns, and I would certainly appreciate your vote and your support. You can learn more by going to my website, Jakious, JAKIOUS.com. Thank you.
Well, you heard it from Rick. You heard it from me. I've had a really great time.
Likewise.
Chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming down here. You saw the studio earlier. If you'd like to share one of your family recipes, we obviously invite you to come down to the kitchen. And with that, I have to end. I'd first like to thank Rick again for joining me. I'd also like to extend an invitation to anyone running for the 6th Congressional District seat to come and chat with us. You can reach out to me on social media. My name is Andrew Whitcomb. Or you can reach out directly to Saugus TV, Saugus TV General Mail at gmail.com, 30 Main Street in Saugus. I welcome any discussion. I'm happy to ask any questions. And as always, if there's any local officials or state officials or anybody else that you'd like to hear me talk to, please, I'm happy to. Thank you to everybody at SCTV for making this show possible. Thank you to Rick for joining me.
Thank you, Andrew.
And we'll see you next time on Know Your Town.
The preceding program was produced through the community television facilities of Saugus TV. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of Saugus TV, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.